I'm Molly Suberthorpe. Welcome to my channel, where I offer bite-sized tutorials and demonstrations in calligraphy and hand lettering, and upload a brand new video every Friday. This week you can follow along with me while I make a layout design of an excerpt of a poem by Amanda Gorman, The Hill We Climb. We'll be using watercolor calligraphy as well as some other really fun layout techniques. Today I want to use a backhand style, which is a pretty fun kind of whimsical style that utilizes slant lines that are literally backwards. So the italic slant actually slants to the left rather than to the right. I have a set of backhand slant guide brushes that come with my calligraphy composition maker linked below, and that's what I'm using here. I like to use them in a contrasting color and then reduce the opacity of the layer. That allows me to have high contrast when I work with black brushes. To create an entire guide sheet to cover my page, I'm just duplicating my guide layers and adjusting them accordingly. Selecting black from my color palette, I'll then choose my favorite pencil brush. You can choose any pencil brush that you like, including the ones that come with Procreate. And then I just get started sketching out my quote on a new blank layer. You can see here how I'm adhering to those backhand guidelines which make the negative italic slant. It can be really fun to practice like this, but since it's so unusual and not what our hands are used to, it can take a little bit of practice. But once you get the hang of it, I think that you'll find it really enjoyable. In fact, some of my left-handed students have told me over the years that this actually comes more naturally to them. If you're left-handed and you agree, let us know in the comments. Now let's pause for a moment so I can tell you a little about the history of backhand script. While it can appear very modern, negative italic writing has been documented since the 16th century. Back then it was quite rare and appeared as a broad tip calligraphic style. This example is from 1539, in fact. Backhand script was popularized in English in the 19th century, and it mostly appeared in the United States. Back then, all handwriting was script, and most of it was a traditional right-slanting italic. So backhand was often used to contrast normal writing, just like we use right-slanting italic today. I take inspiration from my modern backhand calligraphy from the traditional handwriting of librarians, which was popular at the turn of the 20th century. I think it just has such a striking, timeless appeal. Now, back to the layout design. I've just completed the first line of the poem, and I know that it's going to be the longest line of the poem. So what I've done is reduce the size of the text of this line, and I'm sizing it so that it will all fit together on one line. And then I'm going to resize the guidelines accordingly so that the next lines that I continue to write will all be the same size as this first line, and because this was the longest line, I know that all the subsequent lines are going to fit. As I move from one layer to the next, I always make sure to make a new blank layer. And then when all of my sketched lines are complete, I simply group them all together by swiping right on the layers and tapping Group. Since I drew every line on its own layer to begin with, that makes it really easy for me later to go in and adjust the spacing of the words and adjust how the overall line of text fits within the centering of the composition. Here I've selected a contrasting color of hot pink, and I've gone back to my pencil brush, and on a blank layer right above my initial pencil sketch layer, I'm just going over and making refinements to my sketch. Oftentimes this means extending ascenders up to hit that ascender line, extending descenders to hit the descender line, adjusting letter slants so that they better adhere to the slant lines, and just little things like that so that I just really get a more refined sketch before I do my calligraphy. In a moment, I'm going to reduce the opacity of both of these sketches so that when I use my inking brush over top of them, I'll be able to use the combination of the two sketches as my template. With my sketches and my refinements complete, I'm coming over to my own watercolor calligraphy script brush pack, and I'm selecting an ombre colored brush that I think is going to work really nicely with this composition. I'm starting out by just testing it to make sure that the stroke is what I want and that the size is going to be appropriate for my letter size. This watercolor calligraphy brush pack actually comes with 20 different watercolor script brushes, so have a peek at it. I've linked it below, but today I've selected script ombre brush number 4. My mantra of new line, new layer definitely still applies when you're making your final composition. In fact, as I go in this composition, I'm selecting every line when I'm done with it and I'm centering it on the canvas. Later, I'll be making even more refinements in terms of the distance between the lines, but for now I'm just focusing on centering them on the page. If you're familiar with this poem, you might have already noticed that I made a major typo on this line by writing the word we instead of the word catastrophe, but I've left it in this video so that you can see how I fix my mistakes, because making typos is a pretty common error for lettering artists, and it's definitely nothing to be ashamed of. So after I notice this, which is when I'm basically done with my composition, I do go back and I fix it, and I'll show you that bit in a moment. Now that all my lines of watercolor are complete, I have grouped them, and now I'm going line by line and adjusting the distance between the lines. I'm selecting the next line as I go so that I can move multiple lines at the same time and slightly reduce the spacing between them. I'm adjusting this optically, not mathematically, because I always trust my eye when it comes to centering and spacing more than I do exact measurements. Because of flourishes and ascenders and descenders, very often optical spacing looks more natural than mathematically calculated spacing. With my line spacing complete, I want to make some further refinements. So I'm coming from my paintbrush over to my smudge tool and selecting my smudge brush for blending stroke overlaps. This allows me to add even more realism to my watercolor so that the colors blend together the way that watery wet paint really would. If you're interested in an in-depth video demonstration of how I do any kind of watercolor script, especially the ombre colors in Procreate, I've linked to that below. Now it's time to fix that typo. I've come into my layer and I've selected the word we. Swiping down with 3 fingers, I'm able to select cut, which quickly and easily deletes the word. And then I'll select the next word, possibly, and just move it over quite considerably to give myself a lot of space because I don't exactly know how long my new word is going to be. Now I'll duplicate that guide layer that I had and slightly resize it and move it around, because remember that we slightly changed the sizing and spacing of our lines already, so it no longer perfectly adheres to our guideline. Next I come in and choose my pencil, and on a new blank layer I sketch in the word catastrophe and adjust the spacing. And then again on a new blank layer I come back to my watercolor brush and I fill in the new word. Thank you for following along with me today in this watercolor poetry layout. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you create one yourself and you post it on Instagram, please tag me so that I can see what you create. I always love to see what my subscribers are up to. Also remember that in the description box below, I've posted some other helpful videos that might keep you going on your calligraphy and Procreate journey, as well as links to all of the brushes that I used in today's video. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you back here next Friday.